Thank you, Martin, and thank you everyone for joining us here this evening. It's particularly great to see a lot of our students in the audience. I noticed there are a lot of my politics students, and I think also quite a few of Martin's history students, so that's brilliant. So it's my pleasure to introduce for this evening's lecture Major General Kristin Lund, who has had a fascinating and much decorated career spanning logistics, civil-military cooperation and coordination, light infantry, mediation, and gender equality. She retired from active duty in December 2019, but remains active, I would say, in many other ways, including through her role with the Nordic Women Mediators Network. She is a woman of many firsts. She was the first female officer in the Norwegian army to be promoted to the rank of Major General. Then in 2014, she became the first woman to command a United Nations peacekeeping operation, which she did in Cyprus. This made her the highest ranked woman commander in the UN at that time. She then went on to head the UN military observer for the United Nations Truce Supervision organization that monitors the ceasefire between Israel, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. Again, in so doing, she became the first woman to hold a head of mission for the UN. But her firsts don't stop there. And tonight, I'm delighted to say that she will become the first woman in uniform to give Newcastle's prestigious defence lecture in its more than 70-year history. So history is quite literally being made in this room tonight. So it's unsurprising then, given all those firsts, that General Lund has championed gender equality throughout her career, aiming to bring an end to women being firsts, but rather to work towards women becoming an accepted and also expected part of the military at national and international level. And this is the topic that Major General Lund will be speaking on tonight. And that reflects on what women bring as leaders to the military. So with that, Kristin, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you, and then we'll come back to the audience for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you can probably hear on my voice that my voice has been not playing on my side, but I will do my very best this evening. First of all, thank you very much to Dr. Katharine to bring me here. It's always nice to come to UK, and I have a special relationship because I've been in command of several of British troops, and especially on Cyprus. What I would like to do today is that I will try to give you some of my experience, and I will use especially those two missions, my two latest missions, but I will also draw from my experience from Afghanistan. And if there is any abbreviations, I will try not to use abbreviations, but that, you know, it's very often in the military or any type of organization, you have your own abbreviations, so I will try to avoid. As the title, in my views, of course, it could be answered very fast, and that is yes, and I can go. But I will try with my experience and knowledge, I will try to tell you why I think it's important. I think it's, well, you have to judge yourself, and then we will see. As you see here on the picture, I worked with different general secretaries in the UN. And Ban Ki-moon, he was the first that appointed me as the force commander. And normally that process takes a long time. But because it was the first time, and of course he would like to have from his legacy as Secretary General that he was the first. So after 3 months after the decision, normally it goes 6 months before they announce when the new force commander is selected. So he asked me to come to New York And that's the first time that they actually ask a force commander to come and to take my picture together with him so we can make a point. I felt it was not only a point for him, but it was also to the troop contributing nations to tell them that it is important that start to send and to, in a way, educate women up through the ranks so they can take on these missions. And you wonder, why did it take so long? Well, you can just go probably look into your own military for those that are from UK or from other nations. And it reflects also actually the situation in your society. What kind of gender gap do you have in your country? So that reflects also the military. Conflicts today are not as they was, 20, 30 years ago. Now, what we thought in a way that we were, building our forces and even UN capacities for the future, we thought, it would be much more hybrid, more cyber, and more in other domain than normally. But the war in Ukraine has shown us that still conventional war is unfortunately still a big issue. So, but also if you see here on the picture that war is not only for men anymore, it's all are participating, women, men, and even children. I will start to talk about Cyprus. And Cyprus, I will not go into the history of Cyprus because then that will just, take hours. And I know probably you here in UK know maybe more about that than me. But just to say that Cyprus got its independence in 1960 from UK. There were 3 guarantors, UK, Turkey, and Greece. But even before UK or Great Britain gave their the country back in a way, it was unrest. This unrest came to terrible situations in a way in '64. So in 1964, UN, it was a request to the UN Security Council, and they decided to send a peacekeeping force to Cyprus, consisting of about 6,000, 7,000 soldiers all over the country. Here you see what in a way have caused the problem, or some of the problem, when you see all the people moving. So, and you still see here areas that the UK are still holding, and also up in Nicosia. So that was, in a way, just, I will not say that very much more, but of course, when you have 165 moving from the north, just running out from the villages, and then to the south, and lose everything, and not that many. It was actually mainly from Paphos. And for those that have been to Cyprus now as a holiday place, Paphos is now one of the centers for tourism and has been very well developed. So in the peace negotiation, if you're going to have property that you left in 60 or in 74, that is not very much value compared to today and so forth. So it's challenges. But what happened in 74, even though you had the UN was not able to do the things, so it was a clash, and then Turkey intervened. And just listen to what I say, they intervened, and they had that right according to the guarantors in a way. So they intervened, but then they didn't, take, that comply, 20% was Turkish Cypriot. They actually took 1/3 of the country. And then the UN was kind of pushed into the buffer zone. So it's kind of traditional kind of peacekeeping with a buffer zone that is 180 kilometers long from east to west. So the task I had here, I'm trying just to give you a little background, is that this is what the soldiers were doing. And you see the terrain is rigged, and of course you also have urban. And of course the urban area is the most challenging, and there is the Great Britain troops are in Nicosia Center. And that is because they have the most experience, and I think that's why they are placed there. But these are the things that we were doing in the buffer zone. So I'll come back to a little. Next, just this is, I think, probably the most militarized island in Europe. And here you see the what my soldiers, because the force were reduced from 6,000 down to about 1,000, but people on the ground was about 860. Between those, so you can imagine, I told my soldiers that, you know, our weapons cannot stop. The only thing we have, and the most important weapon, is actually our mouth. Mouth is the most important. It is that you have to talk to every incident that comes and not use arms. What was special on this here, and I was the bridge, they were not allowed to speak to each other in the north and the south. So they talked through me or through directly to the leaders, talked among each other. But this guy, he had been working in NATO. This guy, they're both 3 stars. They have been on key leader training, one from Turkey and one from Greece. And they are now sitting on 2 different sides. We had common friends in the NATO system. So my first meetings with these separate meetings were kind of fantastic because we had a common ground, and that was a fantastic way to build trust, that we had common friends. This guy, Major General Lund, he was the head of the security forces. That's the abbreviation for the security forces. He had actually gone to the same U.S. Army War College some years after me, but we had a lot of faculty members that we had in common. So then the ground for building trust to each other was there. Another thing, the military issues, we can use NATO doctrine. So we understood, you know, what we were talking about. We didn't use Cyprus, South, or Turkish, but we used, you know, NATO, because then we know what we were talking about. So the military issue for me on this mission here was, for me, not a challenge. So we, after a while, got a very good relationship. And what I did also, I invited also their wives to the lunches we had, or meetings, because then I got much more information, and I'll come back to that. Just it's always, even though, you know, I've been out many times, there are always colleagues coming from other cultures that would try to test you, and of course, you have to try to go in it and show, and of course, it's quite interesting when you start to deal with military issues, like a rock drill that was important before any kind of operations, and it was a lot of operations because there's a lot of demonstrations and things that you need to combine the UN police and the military. And very often we hide the military and use the police first, the civilian UN police, not to kind of escalate. And if somebody doesn't know what a rock drill is, it's a rehearsal of a concept for where you go through like a war gaming of the operation. And as you said, the head of mission was also a lady, so half of the leader group of the mission was women, and that was much easier to deal with, I must say. But it's important you know, I hit this poor guy down, and but you know, they want me to try everything, and that's also typical. I think a lot of people here have been tested. So another thing, military skills competition. Until I was coming there, it was only men participating in this military skills competition. And I wondered why you have women in your units. And I said, well, I changed that. I changed, so you have to have at least one woman on the team. I changed also the different tasks, because it was very much driven on physical, you know, dragging a lot of ammunition and things. And that mission, we will never do that. So it was much more for me to find tasks that they have to use the whole team, use their head, and in a way prepare what happened if they came under an attack or something, how they should do with, you know, everything from first aid to other things that, you know, to talk to persons that are kind of threatening you and so forth. So I kind of turned that around. So in every type of competition, they had to have both gender in the competition. And that was important, just to show and to make the difference. Another thing also that, you know, I'm using you because there are a lot of from Great Britain here now. And that is because, and I say Great Britain because you know that a lot of your troops have, you know, they have Gurkhas, they have other units from other parts of your Commonwealth. So then they said, well, we don't have women in the infantry and so on, and they're not here, and you know. But I said, you know, when you are putting down your contingent to send to Cyprus, you even though you don't have them in infantry, you will have them in logistics, in communication, and so on. And you know, be smart and make sure that you have, so you can participate. And so now it was kind of becoming a very competition, actually, to call back home and make sure that they got women. That was good, I would say. This goes a little slow. Yeah. Another thing also that if you see here how it looked, for me, I had kind of three priorities. One was posture. You know, if you look at some of these old hair, you know, when they look at that UN force and you see things that are looking terrible, you know, they will also think the force is like this. It's kind of just, you know, they're just there. So it's important to also look proper. That goes also for the personal. And when you are on a mission, there's no time off, in a way. You have to watch your back. Yeah. So this was some of the things that we started to do. And you know, when I was done there in 2016, I started, you know, there was a lot of projects, for example, that all the OPs and the checkpoints or whatever could accommodate both sexes. That was not the case. And that was important for me, that there should not be any reason why women should be able to be on all the positions in that mission. For example, also the PT room, or the physical training room, the gym, they had to take down these posters with, you know, all kinds of women in different positions. Just to say something. Another thing also, my leaders, at this time it was a lot of problems on African continent with sexual abuse, and so we really had to work with the commanders. And And I can tell you, because I've been out so many, I know that there's not very many force commanders that goes in and check out the different countries, what is legal in that country when it comes to prostitution. I found out that I had nationalities in my force where prostitution was legal. And what happened, you know, when you come away from home and so on, you know, that it's very easy. So I had to talk to my commanders and say, you know, you have to learn about survival sex, you know, and we really, every Friday I had them in and we had a meeting. And some of them said, it's the first time I'm sitting with a general talking about survival sex. And, but you need to be that direct to your commanders, because I said I don't accept. So I had to go with the military police around that night just to, you know, to show that I was involved. And also all those lectures that we had, I was present when it came to code of conduct, gender, HEI, etc. You have to be there as a leader. And of course, since I felt that the military task was quite, it was not that demanding, but being the first opened a lot of doors, and I went through those doors and engaged in the civilian life. I was adopted by you know, for example, the ambassadors on the island, female ambassadors. That gave me also another kind of hand or a voice into the political level. We also had, was mentioned, the Nordic women mediators, women or the network came down as the first field trip, and then we arranged so they could talk with the group in the peace process dealing with gender equality. Because a lot of these ladies have been, you know, in peace processes, Middle East, Colombia, Philippines, etc. And it was important to engage. This was kind of women's walk where we had women from the south and north, and we walked together, talked about challenges, etc. Up here, we were able to get the two first ladies, the wives of the leaders, where we were gathering them in a way to show, because they have their networks, they are role models in their communities. So it's so important that we were taking them together so people saw that they liked each other, they were friends. And we had these things going on, but then I was leaving in July. It was a huge wildfire on the island, and one part asked, and people got killed, to wait. But then I was gone, and my predecessor, he was not. He was a he, and it was not natural for him to go in with the first ladies, unfortunately. Back to the Middle East. I have to rush a little. I see the time is flying. This maybe somebody recognizes this building. United Nations Truce Supervision Organization is a much tougher mission when it comes to political issues. As I said earlier today, everything you do when you are on a force commander or head of mission, everything you do as a military is political. So you have to think what you say and how you act. What was in here, this is a government house that was built in 1933, and it was the home or office of the British High Commissioner for Palestine. And then after, I think close to the 40s, it was given to the UN, no, to Red Cross, and then it was given from Red Cross to UN, so that was the headquarters. So this was my home for 2 years. This was my office. This was my apartment. This was my garden, sunken garden. So I can't complain. That's the best place to, but also the most challenging. I was not very much there because I worked, that I will tell you, in so many countries. So Okay. The UNSO mandate is the oldest mission in UN history. It doesn't have an end. The end is, as you see there, when the peaceful adjustment for the future situation in Palestine is reached. So that we can just wonder if that's possible, but it's needed a Security Council resolution to end that mission. It's from 48, it's the first and oldest. And here you see where I worked. The headquarters was in Jerusalem, and I had people in Egypt, Syria, Golan, and South Lebanon, and Beirut. So that was what I was doing, you know, and to go, I had to drive. Only place I was flying was to Egypt, but I used 12 hours from Jerusalem to through Lebanon to Damascus, and I was the only one in a way that had free access to all these countries. But it took a lot of time. So going to Syria, it took more than a week. So you can imagine, and I do that every month, more or less. So I had close to 200 days of traveling. So what did we do there? UNSO has a very wide variety, from being seen on the side of Suez Canal. That was a wish from Egypt that UNSO should wave the flag in Suez. It was being up at the mountains where, thank God it was the Nepalese that were up there, because it's quite high and you need to have proper equipment. This is from the first time, it was 8th of March, where there were female kind of engagement in the population in Syria. And most of my time was used in Syria, actually. But it was important to, for me, for example, when we hired new interpreters in Lebanon, to get females. You know, most of the time was the only men. So you had to really work hard to make that. I just had to see how it looked before we got, this is on the Syrian side. So a lot of time was used to refurbish. This was when before I left. Also, when you are in that position, you are used also by the UN in many things. For example, Germany, then she was the minister, and they asked me to come to the Security Council and brief them on the situation when it comes to women, peace, and security, when Germany was at the president of that. And Syria, we had a Norwegian envoy in Syria, and I was in a way his ears and eyes, because he couldn't get it through the other channel, so then he could get situation awareness from me. Also hear how you engage in women's groups. I did that too. I went to universities, because a lot of people in those countries doesn't know very much about the UN and why we're there. That's probably why they are not happy that we are there. Very fast, because time is running. Afghanistan. You see, I'm sitting there, not very many. At a time, NATO has not made any activities for women, for example. So we had to really do some mission creep, because that was really important to focus on that segment. So the next operational plan that was in, but when we arrived as the first NATO contingent in 2003, it was not in. But that was important, and we had to make networks in a way to get female interpreters. And suddenly the intel couldn't understand why we had so wide reports. That was because we could suddenly we had access to the whole society. Here I just show some of your colleagues. that I have to lend them some of my officers so they can do house searches, etc. And of course, they had to also agree, you know, to do these house searches, they had to also get the yes from the local authorities in the area. We did a lot. At least my country, Norway, if they were going to do any refurbishment in Afghanistan, they said the schools had also to have access for girls. And that was a good thing. Only thing was that the projects, for example, was much more expensive because you need to have then a wall around the school. But at least, and sometimes when you are standing in front of 400 these young girls and you're trying to say something positive about the future, it's not easy. A lot of these could speak a little English because a lot of them had been in Peshawar during Taliban time. So they had watched TV, and actually I was surprised. So they were so eager to speak English. But, you know, what kind of hope do you give them? Some takeaways. As I said, trust is the most important, that my experience. You know, you have to build trust. If you have not the trust of the parties, you will not, and also to change in a way, to get access and so forth. Also, respect for diversity. By having women and being myself, especially in Afghanistan, I had access to 100%. Also, I represent UN, that where, you know, democracy and values from the UN is important, and that's why it's important that UN actually show that they have female leaders. You see here, and I think having diversity gives you a much more holistic approach. So you will find, and that was my experience. I knew what was going on in the society because I could have access to the whole society. And I think that is the most important argument for having both, in that you will not be able to do it without the women. As simple as that. And very often, most in societies where there are conflict, a lot of the men are dead and gone. So it's actually the women that has to build up the society, and if you don't use them, who else will do it? Yeah, humble. I use that very often because you need to be humble in these when you are a leader with so many cultures and so on. And but it's not easy. I just tell you, this is my security team in Lebanon. So I could not, for example, go to a pizza here or something. Everything had to be organized. So it's kind of, it was not easy either. And I don't know if they had the same if I was a man. But I think for them it was also, you know, they could bribe that, okay, we have taken care of this female general. I just had to have a little irony here. Okay, I think that is the time. There are some good times.